Welcome back. We are coming to you live from the Results Operations Center in Midrand, north of Johannesburg. Seated here with me is Zaakirah Vadi from Defend Our Democracy. Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. We've always interacted in the digital space, but here we are sitting side by side at the Results Center. How are you this afternoon?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well.
All right, so it's been a busy few days for you, I assume, observing elections so far. Talk to us about that experience as it has happened over the past 24 to 48 hours.
But it's been a very exciting experience. We had over 1,000 registered or accredited observers, and from those, we think many went out into the fields, covering over 500 stations across the country. So it's been an incredible exercise, I think, of active citizenry, just seeing the numbers of people that were dedicated to going out as observers.
Mm. When you sent out that call for people to come and assist defend our democracy with your work out there in the field, what was the response like? Of course, in terms of sign-ups and subscriptions, but also people who actually eventually did show up on election day to participate in observation.
So initially, it took a bit of explaining around what an observer does. I think there's a bit of a lack of understanding. There's party agents, and then you have um, IEC staff that are putting out recruitment advertisements at the same time. So a bit of confusion initially. But once we overcame that hurdle, there was a lot of excitement. And I think people saw an interest in it because of the fierce nature of contestation before this election. And that generated a lot of interest.
Mm. And in terms of your observations so far, any incidents that you've discovered at any point?
Well, the main thing that we've picked up from observers were the long queues, and those are generally the reports that have been coming through from political parties, from the IEC themselves as well. The breakdown of the voter management devices, the system basically not working. And lastly, I think, some speculate that it could be perhaps due to a higher voter turnout. Others say it's not necessarily related to that, but a bit of anxiety or tenseness in queues in certain stations. So there were isolated incidences in Limpopo. There was certainly one where people started getting restless in the queues, political parties started arguing. In the Western Cape, there was a case where the queue was apparently 8 hours long. People was just simply exhausted. One incident that came through via the WhatsApp group that we were monitoring as well, a voter collapsed in the queue. So that was the one thing that I think we picked up quite a bit. The other thing was the outage, the power outage that took place in parts of Gauteng. So from I think Portsburg all the way through Lenasia and the greater south of Johannesburg, the lights going off while counting was taking place or while counting was starting at certain stations. That proved quite difficult because you had IEC staff and observers pulling out their cell phones and using cell phone light for a while. And when once the counting process starts, you can't leave the room. No one can leave the room. That door is closed. So you have to make do with what is there, unless there's help that's brought in. One of our observers, where the lights were off, there was a generator that had to be brought in. Petrol ran out, more petrol had to be brought in. So there's a whole lot of logistics that goes between one part, as simple as the lights going off malfunctions.
Mm. And just finally, I mean, last night we were discussing, of course, when I say we, it's the team at Salam Media, where we were discussing the dynamics of this election, particularly focusing on the Muslim aspect of it, the Muslim vote. When you look at observation, in that regard, would you say Muslims have heeded the call, have taken up the civic duty to play a meaningful role in ensuring the freeness and fairness of this election?
It's difficult to say because our observers were spread across the country in different provinces. Many of our observers were in far flung rural areas. And it's not often that you have insights coming in from, deep into Limpopo province, for example, or deep into Eastern Cape, where oftentimes there's not a lot of coverage. So that's been one of the most interesting experiences of this. In terms of the Muslim vote specifically, I think it would be difficult to analyze that unless you go according to perhaps older group areas, where you would see significantly more people clustered according to race, and in some instances, not always reflected according to religious beliefs. So it would be difficult to kind of make a call on that judgment. I think what would be a better call is once we get the final IEC results around voter turnout to make an overall assessment thereafter. For me, and this is separate to defend our democracy, so in my personal capacity, I think it's very encouraging to see many more younger people, especially actively involved both in political parties and outside of political parties. I think there's a growing realization that politics can't be left to politicians alone. You can't just leave it to whichever political party that there is. And there's a need to get involved, whether formally or informally. And, just before the electoral process kicked off, there was a debate hosted by the MSA Union just a week or two before elections, and it was very interesting to see the young Muslim people who had organized themselves into a students' movement coming up with the idea of a political debate. And hopefully, this election will encourage many more people to become involved. After this election, we also centered and focused on the results and what's it going to mean for the politics of our country. But post elections, there's going to be a need to hold political party representatives accountable. And whether that's in a coalition government at different levels or not, we need to redefine what that accountability means and how citizens can exercise accountability more effectively.
Zaakirah Vadi, shukran so much for your time and for your insights this afternoon.
Jazakallah.
That was Zaakirah Vadi speaking to us from Defend of Our Democracy. They've had their observers in various polling stations across the country over the past few days, making sure that, first of all, the elections run smoothly, freely and fairly, and also in the aftermath of that, also making sure that counting is done similarly. Just quickly, before we leave you, a quick recap of the results as they come in. As we see it at the moment, the ANC remaining in the lead with 41.7% of the vote. The DA coming in at second place, 22.5%, and the MK party, 12% there. Stay tuned. We'll come back to you with more coverage as and when it happens.